Lex Bell, Lexbell. I'm the Chief of Police for the Moab City Police Department. Today we are going to talk about a cold case that has been in this community for 51 years and has gone unsolved. And it's an emotional day for a lot of people in this room, so you'll understand as we go through at least our portion of what we want to present and how we want to speak about it. But I wanted to lay kind of some quick groundwork, or at least some background on this. On Friday, March 2nd, 1973, Ann Woodward found herself alone at the bar with an unknown male. That man would end up robbing her, assaulting her, and brutally murdering her by strangling her with the leg of her own pants. Ironically, 51 years later, that pair of pants is what led us to her killer. I'm going to quickly turn time over to our detective, Jeremy Drexler. He took the initiative when he came here. I myself just started with Moab Police Department 2 years ago as the assistant, and now I'm the chief. We've been recruiting talent and people with a lot of experience for this police department. We've done a great job with that. Detective Drexler is an outstanding detective, and he's done an amazing job with this. No one assigned this to him. He saw that it was not solved, and he said, this needs to be solved, and I'm going to solve it. So I want to give him a lot of credit for that. Sheriff's Office has also been an integral part of where we are today. Without them, clearly we wouldn't be here as well. Detective Drexler is going to go through a few slides to show you how we got from 1973 to today, and he will let everyone know during his presentation who we have now learned was the killer of Ann Woodward. Detective Drexler.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. I'm going to start out stating by it certainly wasn't only me. It was the leadership we have now, the leadership we have at the Sheriff's Department. It was a collaborative effort of all of us working together. I will admit I'm a driving force, and I was not going to stop until I figured it out, and we figured it out all together. So on March 1st, 1973, Ann Woodward, owner and bartender of Woody's, left for work, and she never came home that night. Ann was a devout Catholic and a member and a mother of 4 children when she was murdered in her bar at closing time. A bar patron that frequented Woody's bar. He worked at the Rio Alga mine and would frequent her bar. He was one of the plus 30 suspects at the time that they interviewed and went after, if you will, in 1973. Today, after 51 years, 2 months and 19 days of this crime going quiet in the city of Moab, I can now announce who is responsible for Ann's murder in the early morning hours of March 2nd, 1973.
Somebody, are you able to pull it? We need to do the left turn so you can see this.
It shows live here with us.
Some typical passionate work.
Right. Let's see. Share here. This one? Yes. Thanks, Summer. Sorry.
This person is Douglas Keith Chodamalka. He was approximately 35 years old when he took Ann from her husband, her children, and the community of Moab. Douglas Keith Chodamalka was born February 7, 1937 in Nebraska. He also died in Nebraska in October of 2002. He had a criminal history that expanded several states in several decades. If he was alive today, I would be asking Grand County District Attorney Steve Stocks for an arrest warrant for Douglas K. Chodamalka for the crime of first-degree murder for his actions on March 2nd, 1973. I have several PowerPoint slide here that I can go through, and it describes the DNA process and how we found him, how we found the DNA, as well as the case as a whole when it started from 73 until it ends here today. I want to extend my condolences to the Woodward family and hope today's announcement kind of provides some small measure of solace and closure from 1973. As the DPS's website had Ann's case up, as well as a lot of newspapers had done a lot of background on it in 1973. That is one of the crime scene photos from the exterior back in 1973. These are the two main gentlemen that obviously did the investigation, the Sheriff Bowman and Chief Melvin Dalton. The exterior of Woody's at the time. Another exterior shot of Woody's at the time from 1973. The interior of Woody's in 1973. You have to remember this is 1973. None of these agencies at the time had any type of cameras. Nobody had a camera. They actually had to ask the news media to come and take photos. So it was an interesting time for that. Ann was sitting at the bar at one point or another with another person. That person was unknown. We were able to determine that Ann was sitting where the green was, and the red circle that you see there was somebody that was sitting next to her. Now, this person that was sitting next to her in the red, we had no idea whether or not if he was the one that committed the crime, because the crime that gets committed is around 25 feet away. 29 items were collected at the scene by the Sheriff's Department at the time. Every single item that you see here had been sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Every item had been sent to the FBI. Both agencies worked pretty diligently trying to figure out who it was. They took some hair samples from many suspects. They honed in on Doug pretty early on as well. They took hair from Doug and sent that hair and fibers in to try to match it with hair and fibers that were at the crime scene. They also took Doug's fingerprints at the time to try to match it against the glass that I just showed there as well. It's to note that Melvin Dalton would later on in interviews state that he felt that if he had a homicide detective, he'd be better off. He felt that he didn't do enough for the case. And Melvin had such forward thinking that on the sheet on the right, he wanted to match Doug's blood type with the way a cigarette was smoked and taking the filter and sending it to the FBI to match the blood type. The FBI sent the cigarettes back and basically stated, this is too much forward thinking. We can't do that. We can't match a blood type with a cigarette. Those cigarettes then come back to us. Those cigarettes stay in the same carton when they were sent back from 73 FBI, in the same box. No one had touched them since FBI sent them back when I found them. Many latent prints were taken from the scene. The main glass that the suspect may have drank from, none of the fingerprints matched any of the suspects. And back in 1973, we didn't have what we have today, digital fingerprints, other things that we can utilize and help us out. They really went after the fingerprints on whoever was sitting next to Ann to figure out who killed her. None of the fingerprints matched. I've had cases in the past as well where I've had fingerprints that haven't matched and I've had to go a different way of it. So they kind of started doing a different way of it and started doing polygraphs as well. The case he's on early up, obviously they do polys and all that. However, lots of evidence is sent in. A lot of the suspects, 3 or 4 of them, according to the notes that I read, got attorneys and no longer wanted to talk. So at that point, the case goes quiet. You're going to see in there that I name it quiet. Obviously, it's listed on DPS website as a cold case, but I renamed it the quiet case after I took it and started walking around and speaking to people with it. There were a lot of people that wanted to talk about it. So the cold to me gives the connotation that it was forgotten, and it was absolutely, Ann was not forgotten at all. It was not forgotten. It was just quiet. Just got to ask the right questions. Which one? This one? Oh, right here? No, there we go. Like that? Is that better?
A little louder,
There we go. In 2006, Police Chief Mike Navarre officially opens it up. I utilize Mike a lot in this. Mike is with us here today. Mike was my historian on this case. There were many a time stopping at Mike's house, sitting at his kitchen table, and just talking back and forth. Mike, I know, wanted to solve this very, very badly before he left the police department. Mike paved the path for me as well, actually paved the path for us, for our agencies to solve this with some of the notes that he had, his historian views on it. He opens up the case in 2006. He technically started working on it in 88, he says, because it never went away. He's given playing cards that are there. He's also given a couple glasses. And at the time, Mike believes that the glasses are from the suspect and the victim. However, later on, I find out that the glasses that he gets were not from the bar. They were actually taken from the sink, and they were extras that were there that were given to him. The DNA comes back inconclusive on the glasses that he had sent in back in when he did the investigation from 06 to 2011. 2 months after I arrived in Moab, I was hired as a detective here. I kind of start running with it, start looking at the case. The case jacket was quite thick. It's handwritten notes. 1973, there's no records management system. I just can't go to the computer and say, hey, this evidence is here. Hey, this note here. This is a written statement here. But a couple of dates that I wanted everybody to learn here is in January of 2023, there was an FBI analyst in the FBI lab. Her name is Nicole. She found 15 of the fingerprints from 1973 in the FBI archive in Virginia. These fingerprints had never entered APHIS before. So I immediately wrote up a letter having these fingerprints entered to APHIS to do the automatic fingerprint system, which was created by the FBI in 1999. September 14, 2023, we find 2 boxes of evidence in the back corner of the evidence room in the Sheriff's Department where all their older cases are. In October 13th, we find additional OME photos, which greatly help us out as well. And then November 1st, the evidence goes to the crime lab, and then May 21st, we get the DNA results. So January 20th, the fingerprints are found. There's 15 unknown fingerprints out of the 15 that I was told from the FBI lab. 13 of them were viable, and viable means that they could be placed into the APHIS system for matches. They had never been seen the light of day until 1973. Those fingerprints are entered in. All of the fingerprints come back inconclusive again at that point through APHIS. On September 14th, 2023, myself and Investigator Whitney with the Sheriff's Department go over to the storage area of the Sheriff's Department, and at that time, in the back corner where some of their old case files are and their old cases are, we locate 2 boxes, and inside those boxes are all of the evidence that was collected back in 1973. Everything that you see there at one point or another had gone to the FBI lab and had come back. A couple of those pieces of evidence had actually gone over to like Dallas lab, and it had actually gone over to the state of Utah lab, and everything came back in those 2 boxes and was kept there like it should have been with the Sheriff's Department. Inside, obviously, is the clothing that Ann wore that night when she went to her work. When you're looking at this photo, you can see that she had Kleenex in each pocket. However, in her pants pocket, in the left pocket, there's a Kleenex missing. And in one of the crime scene photos, the Kleenex is actually out on the floor. So when we get this evidence, I now know that the suspect had robbed her. He had put his hand in her pocket and took out her money that she won that night from playing poker. And when he did that, he had a Kleenex from her pocket and discarded it on the floor. That's why I have a missing Kleenex there. A lot of the other evidence that was obtained, everything from 1973. You have to understand, I was born in 1977, so this is 4 years previous to this. So this is really going into a time machine. When we found this, it was a moment where you sit back and you watch what you're doing, because this is it. This is where we find out who did this. A lot of hair samples were there, fingernail scrapings, everything that was there that would have been collected back then. Everything was there. The small little envelope there below the ashtray is actually the sealed container of the cigarettes, of the cigarette butts from that night. I devised a tier area for our crime lab, for the state of Utah's crime lab, to design, and I put it in different areas. We then get together with the crime lab, and we state that we want DNA in 1 circle, and we would love DNA in number 3 circle, so we can tie in what we've got for the person that might have done this. I deliver all the evidence to on November 1st, 2023, all the evidence goes to the crime lab. Out of 29 items that you saw before, it balloons to around 84-ish items after I categorize it and everything. The crime lab wants around 40 of those. They want around 40 of those. So I hand deliver them to the crime lab. May 21st happens, and the DNA results come back. The green circle is where Ann sat with that plastic cup, and she was smoking her cigarettes, which were Herbert Carrington's at the time. The red circle and the red circle and the yellow circle as well that you can see there, we had never known who had sat there. Chief Dalton wanted to match the blood type with the cigarette smoked, and he could not do that because the FBI said we could not do that. However, the DNA from the cigarettes and the 2 camels that were there, Doug Chodamelka is the only one in the entire world that was sitting next to her that night. and his DNA is in those cigarette butts, and that's what we linked him to that seat. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean offhand that he was our guy. So they then have his DNA from the previous hair that was pulled from Melvin Dalton. Melvin Dalton said that he felt that he didn't do enough, but Melvin absolutely did enough. I'm sure he's listening to us now after he passed, but what Melvin's efforts was, at that point, he helped us out greatly with this. So the lab took part of the pants and did inside and outside swabs of the lab, or I'm sorry, inside and outside swabs of the pants as well. Ann's DNA obviously is on there because she's wearing the pants. However, it's got moderate support for inclusion for Doug on the inside and outside the waist of her pants. As you can see here, it says assumed number of contributors, and it shows 4. Ann is 1. Doug is strong or moderate support, and then the other 2 that you have seen there are what's called a low-level frequency or a low-level contributor of DNA. That low-level contributor would not have been enough to remove the pants. Most likely what it is it's our Office of Medical Examiners back in 1973 when they had to do what they had to do to put the evidence together. They brushed against or removed the pants, and that's what we've got there as an extra contributor. The pants that you can see here, they were white and blue, but when you're looking at the blue portion there, that is the inside of the pants. That is the inside of the pants. It's very, very important to recognize this because this would be brought up in court if Doug was alive today. The pants, when they were removed, the right leg went inside out. The left leg did not. So when Ann is strangled with her pant leg, it's the inside of her pant leg. So if you're at a bar setting, we can brush against people, you can do transfer DNA. If your pants are inside out, it's impossible to have DNA on the inside. The swabs of the shirt as well on all of the buttons had Doug's DNA on all of the buttons of Doug. I'm sorry, all the buttons of the shirt had Doug's DNA on them. That's the shirt. The shirt was just a snap button shirt. And then the cuttings and the swabs of the inside of the pant leg that I was just talking about, where it's the inside of the pant leg. There are four contributors. Obviously, Ann is one of them, and very strong support for included is Doug K. Chudmelka. You can see that it says 4 there. The other 2 are so low level that the person most likely is the Office of Medical Examiners. When I asked the lab tech about the 4 contributors, she indicated that the only person that could have tied the knot at that point with the strong support that you got there with what was left behind, you have nighttime, sweaty hands, is going to be Doug Chomena. The other 2 contributors, I'm pretty certain, is the medical examiner's office while they removed the knot from her. The areas in red there is all of the areas where Doug's DNA was found on Ann's clothing that night after it was sent to the medical examiner's office, came back to the sheriff's department and stayed in storage for I think it was 50 years. I think it was 50 years, 9 months, and 12 days is when it was found. Like my notes said before, if Doug was still alive, he died in 2002, I would certainly ask for an arrest warrant to go to Fremont, Nebraska, and arrest Doug for this crime. There is enough probable cause at this point to charge him with the murder of Ann Woodward from March 2nd, 1973. We are still currently testing 2 other items as well. The lab has those. I have been informed by the lab that we will probably see results within the next 2 weeks or so. Doug's DNA will be entered in CODIS as well after this is done. I know Doug traveled extensively. He was brought here by the mine. He worked with the mine. I know for a fact that Doug has a criminal history in Alabama, California, Nebraska, and Iowa. There's other states that I know that he's been at, and those are the states on the bottom, which there's a good possibility that if he's done other crimes that nobody knows about and his DNA is in CODIS as an unknown, with this case, it will come forward as a known. Yeah. Stephen, did you want me?
My name is Stephen Stocks. I'm the Grand County Attorney. First, I want to thank law enforcement for their thorough investigation of this case, especially Detective Drexler. He has provided me an opportunity to review the evidence that you've seen today thoroughly. And based on his and my review, I strongly believe that there would be probable cause evidence to support a charge of murder against Doug. Unfortunately, he has passed. Had he not passed, we would have filed criminal information against him. We would have asked for an arrest warrant and an extradition. I hope today brings some closure to the family, because I truly believe that had this case been presented to a jury, he would have been found guilty beyond reasonable doubt for the murder of Ann Woodward. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming today. Jamison Wiggins, Grant County Sheriff. I would like to thank everybody for coming to this press conference. We're here today showing what interagency relationships can accomplish. This case would not be where it is today without the efforts from both the Moab Police Department and the Grant County Sheriff's Office. Want to highlight and give extra credit to Sheriff Bowman in 1973 for his crime scene evidence collection, and to the office for properly storing that for 51 years so it could be effectively used today. Also want to give another high praise to Detective Drexler from the Moab Police Department for his commitment and initiative in bringing attention and expertise to solving this case. I'd like to also thank, at the time, and later it became Sheriff Nyland. He was the detective on scene that day with the Moab Police Department. Chief Navarre and my investigator Nathan Whitney for finding the evidence that was stored in our evidence room for 50 years. And to everybody else that played a role. We appreciate it.
You've thanked everybody for me. I just, on behalf of the Woodward family, I want to say thank you so much for caring enough to go and look for that. And thank you for both agencies for putting aside any history that prevented that collaborative effort. I think this closure has been a long time coming, and I just want to thank all of you that were involved. And if Bowman and Nell Dalton were here, I would thank them as well.
It was Annie Dalton, granddaughter of Ann Woodward. We are going to wrap this portion up. I wanted also to thank every law enforcement officer over 51 years who put their heart and soul into this case, and for none of them giving up on it, for the great work and forward thinking of past detectives and the chief of police and sheriffs that preserved items that at the time couldn't even be tested, but they somehow knew that someday that would be a piece of evidence that could break this case open. So pretty amazing that 51 years later, we're able to do this. I also hope now that we've identified Ann's killer, that the family, or at least the community, can maybe find some sense of closure. And I pray that it also gives Ann's family some peace at this time. We're going to stop live recording here and make ourselves available for some questions. And if you want to just ask which individual you'd like to talk to. Additionally, the current owner, Sherry Beck of Woody's Tavern, is open to having you go to that so you can see the scene where this actually did occur after we leave here. So if anybody has any questions for anyone, we're good. Sorry. Go ahead and fire away. I'm sure Detective Drexler is probably the man that can answer a lot of them.
Okay, gotcha.
I just wanted to ask, I mean, what does this mean to you personally? You know, this isn't easy to do, and it's a lot of time, and what you do.
Yeah. You have moments, I guess you have moments where, like your marriage, your kids, teaching kids how to ride a bike. This is somewhat of a career type of case. Obviously, we have somebody that went to work. She did not come home. She had children at the time. I know that they wanted it solved in the worst way. That's why everything was sent the way it was. For me, wise, there's always, for me, my belief is there's always justice that can be done, and there's always a way to find it. And nowadays, there are crimes that have been committed that we're going to find out come later on as well. But for me, it's my agencies that I was at in Wisconsin, they kind of guided the path, if you will, when I started being a detective, started looking into things, trying to keep up with trends. You have to keep up with trends, because if you're not, you get behind the 8 ball when you need to do what you need to do to figure out certain crimes. So yeah, it's a great moment. I will be absolutely honest and state that when we found the evidence and I put the evidence in the car, I actually seatbelted it in like it was my child. So I didn't want anything to happen to it whatsoever. So it was the slowest drive from our location, the sheriff's department, and it's like literally like maybe 75 yards over to where it sat. And then when I took it up to Salt Lake to the crime lab, more specifically that pant leg, the lady that took it in, I handed it to her and I was shaking, and she goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "You don't understand this. This is very important. This is extremely important." And then she kind of was looking at it. She goes, "Oh my gosh, it is." And I'm like, this is like my 4th child I'm handing to you. So please be careful. And they were. The crime lab was amazing. Heather and Stephanie from the crime lab, she called me, oh my goodness, many a times during this whole process, and just kind of wanted some extra photos, wanted to kind of look at what you were looking at when it was the pants and where she knew she could test to get what she needed to get. So yeah, it's very nice to close this for the family. For Moab, obviously I'm still young here, just less than 2 years, but still for the family to have it closed, it's very nice.
Do you feel like you got to, I was saying, did you feel like you got to know Ann? I know this all happened
Yes.
before you were born, but
Yes, yeah. So for me, for the case for the first time case, when you're talking about, for me, when I do a case like this, there's certain areas that I have to go. I have to go to the scene. I have to look, obviously, I have to go to the graves as well. Everybody that's involved here, I went to their graves. Obviously, I still have a home back in Wisconsin, so I travel back and forth. As weird as it is, when I bought my wife a truck for Christmas, the truck that I bought her was in Fremont, Nebraska, and the suspect's grave was right next door. So I could have literally stood at his grave, threw a softball, and hit the truck that me and my wife purchased. So that's how that photo was there. We had to know these. We had to know the areas that some of these people were buried. I know that there's other cases that Utah's had where they've had to exhume. They've had to exhume people. We didn't have to do that here because Dalton collected hair and fibers back then, and that helped us do the match. So
they weren't able to arrest Doug back in 1973, but despite the rivalry between Chief Dalton and Sheriff Bowman, I think there was an election involved back then. They did work together eventually, and they both obviously did a good job preserving that evidence. With that in mind, and knowing that there are other cold cases, is there an appetite to, with today's technology, to go back and review these other cold cases to see if we can find success?
absolutely, there is. Absolutely, there can be, and I know that we have another missing person case from 1986 as well. That one's a little bit of a different case. I did start looking at that. I know Sheriff Wiggins has mentioned that they've got a couple cold cases that they're looking at. I know that we've been notified by the state of Utah that there is some grant money that's available for other testing as well. And I could tell you right now, I'm almost certain that Grand County has other cold cases that they're certainly looking at currently for that purpose of testing. So.
Okay, Derek. Obviously, we saw like these mugshots there. Do you have any record of the suspect's actions subsequent to the murder?
I do. The only thing I was able to find is he was born in Fremont, Nebraska. He entered the military and he was in California. I believe it was in 1955 he stole a car. In 1963, he did an assault in California, and then there was a forgery in California, like in the 1970s. And then 72, he arrives in Moab. He's in Moab from 72. This occurs in 73. He does stay here for about a year and a half after the homicide occurs. He does get caught for cattle rustling in San Juan County, and he gets charged and he gets probation with that. I think shortly after that he moves and he's an over-the-road truck driver. He is in Alabama committing a crime in 1978 against a 10-year-old child. And after 78, his criminal history disappears, other than what Nebraska has for him, which according to what I've seen is their public records is some driving offenses, driving under the influence offenses, and some other things like that. I've been in contact with the Nebraska's criminal investigation division and let them know that in the Fremont area, obviously we've solved this case and that his DNA will certainly be entered into CODIS. And there's a possibility if he did other crimes throughout the United States that your old cases from then, you could get a match. You just could get a match. So, but that, other than that, it was somewhat of a mystery from after 78. He's not there anymore. But the mugshot that was there on the left-hand side that you saw there, that mugshot was January 2nd, 2002. And he passes 9 months later. He passes October 2002. So, and that mugshot is actually from a separate Fremont, Nebraska case. I want to say it's Douglas County as well. That's how I got my hands on that one from them. But yeah, all the way up until almost his death, he's in trouble. Leslie. Yes, come on up. Come on up, Leslie. This is Leslie. Leslie is the last daughter.
I just want to say thanks to you.
Yes.
This guy right here is so wonderful that he'll be my friend after this is all over with, you know. And the thing that I'm glad about now is that everybody can quit talking about that my dad did it. I only had a friend, and I thought he was a dear friend like 3 months ago, say that to me. Well, what are you going to do when you find out it's your dad? I couldn't believe it, because if there had been any inclination at any time that Woody had done this to my mom, us kids would have had him. You know, we would have had him right put in prison. I mean, that's just how it was, you know. And now that'll dispel all those rumors. And I wish that Max, Susie, and Tommy and Dad were all here, because it just fucked up our lives, you know. As you can see clearly to this day, it just blew us all out of proportion. We were just, you know, never the same, you know, because she was the center of our whole life, you know. And I just want to thank you. This is such a good guy here.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. Any other questions at all? Thank you.
If anyone's interested in going to Woody's, it's at 221 South. And we'll go ahead and shut down here, and if anybody has individual questions or individuals, they can ask them. Feel free to use the building, we have some